Welcome to Look Ahead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. This afternoon's program, the second hour with Tom Arms, is being pre-recorded due to a commitment this evening for myself. I have a function I have to attend, but wanted to get into this conversation today because we have a lot taking place around the world. So as always, to remind you, you are of course listening to Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. As always, you can email us at viewpointsradio@hotmail.com or via Facebook at Viewpoints on the talk station. Tonight's program, and normally we are talking live with Tom Arms in this hour, of course Tom Arms, with Viewpoints around the world and also with Look Ahead Radio. But this evening's program has been pre-recorded for the benefit of our audience this evening. With that said, we are proud to have joining us this afternoon Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio with Viewpoints around the world. And Tom, good afternoon. Actually, good evening to you, sir.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed. And it's lovely to be on earlier in the day so I can get my beauty sleep tonight.
Oh, good for you. We won't go for the amount of beauty I think you require, sleep you require.
A lot.
But let's talk here quickly, as we say, with weather. We're experiencing global climate change here in the States. We call it summertime. What's it like there in England?
It's fantastic, incredible. I mean, for me, this is the perfect weather. Temperature in the mid-70s, not a cloud in the sky, day after day of sunshine.
And what about rain? We've had significant rain here in the States.
I'm sorry, I've never heard of rain.
Oh, good. In London?
It's been so long.
Really? London is normally a humid.
It's been about 3 weeks without rain.
My, is that unusual?
Well, we're about to have a drought declared, I think. That's what usually happens. The thing about Britain, it's an island, so it doesn't have big rivers and lakes and things.
Right.
So it relies on rainfall to fill its reservoirs. And so if you don't have rain for 2 or 3 weeks, it creates difficulties.
Interesting. One would not think that in light of the fact that, as you said a moment ago, that it is an island. But also the Brits are really known for their humid weather, but also their variety of gardens. What impact is this having on the vegetation there?
Well, the grass is starting to turn a little bit brown, but there are beautiful flowers everywhere. Absolutely gorgeous.
As a matter of fact, we had a caller last week who brought that topic up. Well, moving on to other items that are near and dear to you, close to home to be exact, let's talk about, and we'll get into politics of a national and international variety, but first let's stay close to home with you, Tom. Your wife, Eileen, is in the process of running for an election. How is that coming?
It's going very well. I mean, the only problem with it is I'm losing my voice because I've been shouting from street corners, vote Eileen Riley Arms. So if this conversation suddenly goes quiet, it's because my voice has completely disappeared.
Well, wait a second. Why do you shout? Why not just simply use radio as we are doing today?
We can't. We can't use radio. We're not allowed to. You cannot have radio or television advertising. In fact, there are strict limits on how much you can spend. This campaign, wait for it, we're allowed to spend $1,500.
Wow. Now, you can, of course, solicit support, in-kind support from folks such as maybe your husband, Tom Arms,
yes,
and who will go out and, as you said, shout for her. Let's talk about how this campaign is working. £1,000, so roughly $1,300 or $1,400 in U.S. currency. First off,
£1,200, so about $1,500.
Okay, tell me, what are you using that money for? What are the candidates? How do they use that money?
Printing, almost all printing.
Flyers.
And of course, there's no postage. It's all hand delivered by volunteers. You're right. There are a lot of volunteers.
You say you've been shouting. Are you just shouting her name, or is it a matter of handing out the brochures or pamphlets?
How boring. An opportunity for me to give a speech?
Oh, So there's a lot of speechifying, as we say in the States.
Yes, I stand on corners, on soapboxes, and give speeches.
Wow. Now, this is serious. The soapbox concept is renowned there in England. You even have a park that's dedicated to that.
It's Speaker's Corner.
Right. Is that where you do your speeches, or are you doing it?
No, I do it in the constituency. So I'm doing my speeches outside of railway stations as people are going to work. So I get up at 5 a.m, wander down to the railway station, and by about 7, after I've had a couple of cups of coffee to wake me up, I start bellowing out, haranguing the commuters as they make their way to the station.
In the process, you're talking to a lot of transients, so some of these comments and concerns are falling on, shall we say, deaf ears?
Some of them are, but you try and pick the right railway stations. You just don't pick any railway station. For instance, if you're campaigning in Moorhead City, you don't shout outside a railway station or a bus station in Charlotte.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. The thing that surprises me, and of course, is the limit on the amount of expenditures and what you can do with that money. The other aspect, and I'm curious about this, Tom, is in England, this is a commitment of £1,200 for Eileen's race. Do other races have different thresholds?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
For instance, for the recent mayoral elections in London, it was $600,000.
So it's totally reliant on, if you will, grassroots mobilization of troops.
That's absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. It's mobilization of troops.
Okay, we're going to a break here in a moment, but I find this interesting, and it gives me a better understanding both of your observations and that of the Europeans and particularly those in the UK, about how then you look at U.S. political shenanigans and activities. So I see that.
Oh, yes.
So
you have to be unemployed and rich to run for office in America.
Well, you can be employed, but it does help to be rich. There's no question, or have very rich friends. Real quick, before we go to the break, is this rule comparable in other countries in Europe? UK?
Yes, in the different variations. Each country is different.
Therein lies the interest and, if you will, the observations of Europe about what's going on in the States. We're going to get back to that in just a moment here on Viewpoints from Around the World with Tom Arms.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms with LookAhead Radio's World Report for the week beginning the 22nd of August. LookAhead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. Vice President Joe Biden and Secretary of State John Kerry off to Turkey this week to try to repair relations with President Erdogan following Turkey's failed coup and Erdogan's post-coup trip to Moscow. On the island of Ventotene, the leaders of Italy, Germany and France meet on Monday to discuss how to deal with post-Brexit Britain. Chancellor Angela Merkel will also visit Estonia and Prague later in the week for more post-Brexit talks. Still in Germany, the trial starts in Frankfurt on Monday of German Muslim Abdel Karim al-B, who is charged with war crimes committed while fighting for ISIS in Syria. The foreign ministers of Japan, China and South Korea are expected to meet next week to discuss Chinese actions in the South and East China Seas. Also, Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte flies to Malaysia for discussions with Malaysian counterpart Najib Razak on maritime security. Now that the Olympics are out of the way, the impeachment trial of suspended Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff officially starts on Wednesday. In Africa, the Nigeria Labour Congress is on Tuesday planning a mass protest against the killing by police of 2 workers protesting against a salary cut by a state government. In Cyprus on Tuesday, Greek Cypriot President Nikos Anastasiadis and Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akini hold reunification talks. The island has been divided since 1973. And finally, students at the University of Texas, opposed to the new right to carry concealed guns law, have come up with an interesting protest method. Next week, they start carrying unconcealed sex toys. And that was next week's News Today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned after this message for the expanded Look Ahead World Analysis.
Quick, what do these sounds have in common? These are the sounds of geography. Geography helps us understand connections between people and places. But our kids aren't getting enough of it. Half can't locate Japan or India, and 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. So we created MyWonderfulWorld.org to give kids the power of global knowledge. Go to MyWonderfulWorld.org to learn more. It's a wonderful world.
This is Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 22nd of August. LookAhead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. A high-level U.S. reassurance delegation is flying to Turkey next week in the wake of the failed coup to oust President Erdogan. Secretary of State John Kerry had planned to go on his own. Then Erdogan flew to Moscow to make friends with Putin, and a seat on the plane was found for Vice President Joe Biden. The Obama administration is keen to repair relations with an ally whose strategic position gives it an important role in NATO and the fight against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. In the meantime, Europe's leaders next week start discussing their strategy for Brexit talks with the Conservative British government of Theresa May. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has invited German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande to the holiday island of Ventotene. Angela Merkel flies from Italy to Estonia and the Slovak capital of Prague for more post-Brexit talks with the East European leaders. There will also be multilateral talks in Asia over Chinese activities in the East and South China Sea. The foreign ministers of Japan, South Korea, and China meet in Japan, ostensibly to prepare for a tripartite summit later this year. But the meat of the talks will be continuing Chinese aggression in what the International Court of Arbitration has declared is international waters in the South China Sea. The case against China was brought by the Philippines, and next week its President Rodrigo Duterte will be in Malaysia for talks on the Malaysian claims in the disputed waters. There will also be talks over the possible reunification of Cyprus, which has been divided since 1973. The Greek Cypriot leader Nikos Anastasiadis and the Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akini meet under the auspices of the United Nations. This will be the first in a series of planned sessions scheduled throughout August and September. Brazil will still be basking in post-Olympic glory when the impeachment trial of suspended Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff gets underway in the Brazilian Senate on Wednesday. Dilma Rousseff is charged with manipulating government accounts to mask budget deficits. Also on trial is German Muslim Abdelkarim Albi. He is charged with joining ISIS and committing war crimes. It is alleged he traveled to Syria in 2013, where he desecrated the body of a dead enemy fighter. He was arrested in Turkey and returned to Germany last year. And that was the expanded Look Ahead World Analysis so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned for World Viewpoints with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
This afternoon's program, of course, pre-recorded, as I mentioned at the opening, with Tom Arms from Look Ahead Radio, which is heard every Friday afternoon here on the talk station as well. Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms. And Tom and I were talking just a few moments ago about the campaigning efforts on behalf of his wife, Eileen, who's running for a local office there in London. And I brought up the topic of the U.S. campaigns and how, in light of the fact that in Eileen's case, 1,200 pounds, about $1,500 US is all that she's allowed to spend on her campaign. And then the inavailability of broadcast advertising. Real quickly, Tom, but about print advertising in newspapers, is that acceptable?
Yes, that is acceptable. And billboard advertising is acceptable.
Okay. And then, of course, predominantly, as we mentioned a few moments ago, the speeches done on the corners and also the handing out of pamphlets. Let's talk here for a moment about this comparison to the U.S. campaigns and what you're seeing there in the local media, Daily Mirror, and other publications, the Mail. And what are you seeing and hearing in broadcast circles as well as in Europe? What's happening? What do they see happening in the States in light of the fact that what we have here is a totally unique activity compared to many of the rest of the civilized world?
Well, the foreign pundits, just like the American pundits, are watching very carefully how much the Clinton camp and the Trump camp are raising in campaign funds. Because they know that how much you spend on advertising on television and radio can decide the election. Mm-hmm. And so they're noticing that Clinton seems to be much more successful, and that as seen as being representative of the support that she has within the community as a whole.
And that, by the way, is a pretty accurate data point and trend. voters follow their wallets, as they say.
Yeah, it's a sort of economic democracy, if you like.
Yes. With the recent spate of missteps by the Republican candidate and the foibles potentially criminal by the Democrat candidate, what is the perception there in Europe and the UK over either candidate?
Well, very consistently, they don't like Trump at all. Mm-hmm. That's not to say they're keen on Hillary. They just really, really dislike Trump. So it's a unpopularity race. Not a popularity race, but an unpopularity race, which Trump is winning.
Insofar as success in being unpopular, there is a feeling of that same frustration here in the States. But at the same time, there is a great deal of concern related to how each candidate will respond to their official capacity should either one win the presidency. That being said, again, and this is really treading on old stories and old ground, the reception of Trump in Europe in light of his lack of popularity, should he win, would he be accepted even begrudgingly, or might he find some doors closed in his face, literally and figuratively?
I think he might find doors closed in his face.
Wow.
I really do. It's obviously he's the president of the United States, and therefore, you can't completely ignore him. But people are not going to be at all happy to have to deal with Donald Trump, a man who says that he doesn't really have a wholehearted commitment to NATO. Mm-hmm. A man who says he's opposed to free trade. Those are not things that go over well. Here in Europe.
By the way, related to the NATO issue, the argument I would proffer is that he thinks that NATO needs to change some of its focus and its attention to certain issues such as terrorism. I gathered from the conversations that he still thinks NATO is valuable. It just at this juncture and in the current capacity has not fully fulfilled its value and benefits. But let's set that aside. Instead, I would like to...
It's the way it's perceived over here, Lockwood. That's important.
I think that's important, too. And I think what you said a few moments ago related to perception is the important aspect of this. The other aspect of his campaign, and I'm wondering, the issue of immigrants and the concerns, we're seeing this also in Europe, and we've been treading on this story for quite some time. Any changes in the focus and attention to the immigrant issue as things seem to be heating up even in Germany? What's the future of that debate?
This is August. It's the vacation season. Not much happens politically. There's been a few meetings, but nothing dramatic is happening on that. The only thing which might be construed as slightly dramatic is that the Turkish foreign minister said this week that if the Turks are not given visa-free access to Europe by October, they will let loose the Syrian refugees in the Turkish camps. Whether or not they do that, I have my doubts, because if they do that, they will really be burning their bridges with Europe. And I'm not sure they want to do it. But the Europeans do not want to give visa-free access to the Turks, even though they have promised it.
Interesting. The other aspect of this, of course, is the relationship with Turkey and Russia, and I want to get to that in a few moments. I want to go back to one other issue we brought up about the campaigns with the Clintons and the Clintons, yes, plural, and Trump. And you mentioned Europe's disdain for Donald Trump's remarks about free trade or world trade and greater global community. And of course, in light of the fact that Brexit has occurred there, Britain has elected to leave the euro, is exiting the euro, or European Union, that is. The question we're seeing now, even among Democrats, some concerns related to international trade, particularly the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP as it's called. There are even Democrats within the party that are beginning to question if maybe the issue of world trade, it needs to be reassessed. Is there some concern in Europe about that, especially in UK, in light of the fact that the United Kingdom has elected begrudgingly by some, you included, to leave the European Union.
I think in Europe and the UK as well, there is still a very strong movement in favor of free trade. As one very famous radio show host once told me, a rising tide floats all ships.
True. I've heard that before, yes.
And that is really the principle behind free trade.
But amidst the free trade and the challenges that Europe is facing, and sort of segueing all this together for a few moments here, the issue with the assimilation of foreign nationals, of refugees, there seems to me a possibility that even Europe is going to get a little unnerved by, we'll call it globalization.
Well, yes, it does. It does cause culture clashes.
Okay.
Because with free trade, if it's going to work properly, there has to be free movement of people. You have to exchange ideas, and ideas are in the brains and the heads of people. And that does create problems because you get Poles, you get East Europeans, you get Arabs, Muslims crossing borders, taking their skills with them. That is where the problem arises. There's also the problem of obviously manufacturing and things like that, trying to compete against cheap manufacturers from China. But I think in Europe, the culture clash is more important.
All right, we're going to get back to that in a moment here on Viewpoints from Around the World with Tom Arms. Stay with us for more.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Ben Affleck. The only thing better than playing a hero in the movies is being a hero in real life. Like the 50,000 veterans who returned from Iraq and Afghanistan with devastating injuries. They are true heroes, and they're why I'm proud to support Paralyzed Veterans of America. They make sure veterans with spinal cord injuries get the care and support they need at no cost to them. To learn more, visit pva.org. That's pva.org.
A public service message from Paralyzed Veterans of America.
We now return to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms, joining us from London. And of course, just to make mention and remind everyone, this program today has been pre-recorded. Normally he's live, so taking phone calls. But we'll be happy to take emails and Facebook postings. Emails at viewpointsradio@hotmail.com and Facebook postings at Viewpoints on the Talk Station. Tom, we were chatting a moment ago about the international issues associated with Brexit and trade and transportation, yes. But let's look at a few other items that are really kind of related to that. And one of great interest, and I'm curious, we mentioned Turkey, and this is a topic I just want to touch on briefly. I saw recently that Russia has initiated some strikes leaving from Syria. We've got the fact that
leaving from Iran.
From Iran. I also saw that they were leaving from Syria, that the Russians were getting closer to Assad in the process. The whole issue, though, that's really just emblematic of the bigger question. The communications, the relationship with Russia in the Middle East seems to be improving significantly. Turkey, Iran, Syria. What does this mean, and does this have a concern for both Europe and of concern directly with NATO?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Russia has developed a sort of base of operations and trade and diplomatic relations right across the board now. Iran is almost an ally of Vladimir Putin. Syria is definitely an ally of Vladimir Putin. Standing between them is Turkey, and now President Erdogan is cozying up to Putin, and he might end up being a lot closer. I don't know if we can actually say he'll be an ally. It's certainly true that Erdogan is rather friendless, and Putin is taking advantage of that. The West, on the other hand, has close relations with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and Egypt. And so it's like the Middle East has been cut in half.
Wow.
The northern bit is controlled, not controlled, but dominated by Russia, and the southern bit is dominated by Europe and the U.S.
is there concern that this could become an issue of surrogates for I shouldn't say Russia versus the West?
I would say yes. I mean, we're not there yet. I think a lot still has to happen before that happens, but it's certainly heading in that direction.
All right, let's talk about this. And I've failed to mention the issue of France, but we'll get to that in a few moments. Since we're talking about Russia, let's talk also about the Ukraine and what's happening there.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell whether or not he's actually planning to conduct any military operations, or whether he's simply threatening to conduct military operations in hope of having an easing of the sanctions. Now, I think you have to bear in mind that we're only a few weeks away from a G20 summit in China. Mm-hmm. Putin walked out of the 2014 G20 summit because he was being browbeaten over the Ukraine and did not attend the 2015 summit. The Chinese have said that they want Putin to be made welcome at this summit. And one way, of course, he can be made welcome is by some sort of easing of the economic sanctions. Now, how will the West respond? I mean, Putin's normal policy is, let's turn the screws on, because if we really work hard and make threats, right, then they're going to back down. That's his normal way of doing business. And I think that might be what he's doing. He's preparing for the G20 summit. I don't think it'd be very wise of him to actually, do any military actions in Ukraine at the moment.
But at the same time, you've got this growing relationship in the Middle East with Turkey, with Syria, with Iran. You've got now, by the way, since you bring up China, some concerns we have here in the States over Chinese expansion in the China Sea, south, east, west.
South and east, yeah.
Yes.
There is no West China Sea.
Right, unless it's China itself. But the relations with the Philippines, with Japan, with Indonesia, with Vietnam, with, many of the other countries there in the Pacific have been greatly heightened or made uncomfortable. With the G20, it strikes me that China and Russia are taking advantage of some of the discomfort that, we'll call it, the Western nations are feeling right now. Is there a possibility that the predominantly the two major players, being the Chinese and the Russians, two of the opponents, if you will, taking advantage of the chaos? Is there an interest, do you think, that this is designed to, if you will, keep the other members of the G20 on their toes, or, if you will, maybe knock them back on their heels?
Yes. Certainly the Chinese and the Russians are getting on much better than they have in the past.
Right.
Xi Jinping has a very good relationship with Putin. And so that is certainly something to build with. And you're absolutely right. At the moment, with things like Brexit, with the problems with the euro, with the problems with refugees, with the election campaign in the States, all those things put the West in a poor position vis-a-vis the Russians and the Chinese, or just the Chinese or just the Russians. And they will make hay while the sun shines. And if the situation was reversed, to be honest, so would we.
All right. What role might Britain play in the upcoming G20?
I can't see Britain playing a role in the upcoming G20, much of anything. They don't yet have a strategy on Brexit.
Okay.
They're still trying to work that out. Until they have that, there's not much they can really do.
Well,
they will try and use the G20 to pave the way towards individual trade agreements with G20 members, but they're in a bit of a hiatus. And will be for some time.
Well, and of course, as a result of Brexit. All right. I want to move back to something very quickly before we get into some just a bullet point issues. We've got to talk about the Olympics, which, of course, is underway. We've read with interest here recently, and we touched on it earlier in the program, Tom, and again, Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio, but also Viewpoints Around the World every Wednesday afternoon with Tom, normally live, but today pre-recorded. We've been reading with interest the issue of France. I texted you a note and asked you, France, of course, is a declared secular country. It's created somewhat of a discomfort, though, apparently, for religious groups. Well, predominantly Muslim, but I'm sure other religious groups are equally at times discomforted. And there's a recent story about burkinis. And I'm curious, what exactly is a burkini and why has it become a contentious issue in France?
A bikini is a swimsuit which covers you from the top of your head right down to your ankles.
Okay, as opposed to a bikini.
It's okay. What your great-grandmother used to wear, but now it's worn by Muslim women who have been told that they can't show their bodies in public.
All right. So it's in lieu of a bikini, it's a burkini. But this has created some frustration for Muslims. And I'm wondering, the fact that France is a secular country, is this beginning to raise attention to that approach and that philosophy?
Yeah, well, they actually have for the philosophy. It's called laïcité. And it goes back. It was a result of a legal ruling in 1905, but it really goes back to the French Revolution, when, of course, the Catholic Church was seen as being supportive of the aristocracy. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, they really have moved over the years towards a secular position, strict separation between church and state. There is not allowed to be any religious instruction in state primary schools, elementary schools. It's absolutely forbidden. You shouldn't wear a cross, a crucifix. And of course, they ban the wearing of headscarves or hijabs, as Muslim women call them. And the burqa, which covers your face and everything else except your eyes, is completely banned in France. Now, the question is, I mean, I can see in many respects why they want to do this, but at the same time, should people be allowed freedom of religious expression? Mm-hmm. It's a sort of freedom of speech as well, and the French have that as well. It's a conflict, and in many ways, this is a reaction against the Muslim world caused by the various terrorist attacks.
And, of course, this only heightens the awareness of the terrorist attacks. Before we go to this break, Tom, what is the feeling there in Europe, particularly in France, but other countries as well, about terrorism? Do they feel they're getting a handle on it? All the focus has been on the U.S. and its election campaign and the Olympics, which we're going to get to. But is there a feeling that maybe there's some diminishment of concern?
In France, definitely not. They have lost all faith in the government as far as terrorism is concerned. The president's popularity is at an all-time historic low. The Germans feel they are getting a handle on it, but then they haven't suffered as badly as the French. The British as well feel that they have a handle on it. Whether or not they do, remains to be seen, because all it takes is one big terrorist incident for everyone to panic again. Right. And that's what terrorism is meant to do. Exactly.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation in just a moment with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio, but also with Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Hi, this is Top Chef All-Star Mike Isabella. If you're one of the 15 million Americans with food allergies, you might feel anxious about dining out. But you don't have to be. You just need a game plan. And you can find one online at safefare.org. SafeRadio.org is loaded with information and resources to help you enjoy a safer restaurant experience, including sample questions, tips, and a lot more. Visit safefare.org. That's SAFEFARE.org, because when it comes to managing food allergies, we're all on the same team.
A public service message from Food Allergy Research and Education.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms. The votes are being counted as I'm putting the finishing touches to this broadcast. As soon as I finish, I'm rushing off to the local town hall to find out if my wife Eileen has been elected to the local council. Up until the 23rd of June, ex-diplomat Eileen has been an intensely interested but unaffiliated voter who's floated from party to party. Then Britain voted to leave the EU, and 48% of the country, including Eileen, were plunged into political mourning tinged with bitterness and anger at the appalling conduct of the campaign. Immigration was briefly discussed and dismissed. Too old, too tied. Then the lethargy set in. The piles of dirty dishes and laundry grew to small mountains. Why should we care if 52% of the country were more concerned with the ethnic background of their neighbor than the economic prosperity and security of their country and Europe as a whole? Finally, after a decent period of mourning, came the realization that the only way to escape the trough of despair and self-pity was to climb off the sofa and fight back. So Eileen joined the Liberal Democratic Party, the only national British party still battling to stay in the EU. Almost immediately a by-election was called for a seat on the local council. While still in the throes of do-somethingness, my wife applied to be the Lib Dem candidate. To her total amazement, but not mine, they selected her. The vacation was cancelled and replaced with day after day of writing leaflets, printing leaflets, addressing envelopes, stuffing envelopes, delivering envelopes, knocking on doors, arguing on doorsteps, and haranguing commuting voters outside railway stations. We know how to have a good time. The message was simple. The ruling Conservative Party have declared Brexit means Brexit. The bitterly divided Labour Party has declared Brexit means Brexit. The United Kingdom Independence Party has rejoiced. Whoopee! Brexit means Brexit. They want Europe off the agenda. The only way to send a message to the political establishment that 48% remain desperately unhappy is to vote Lib Dem at every opportunity. Is it working? Well, in national terms, the Lib Dems increased their membership by 25% in just 1 month following the referendum result. In July, the party gained 7 seats in council by-elections. The message was always Europe. It's too early to tell, but Eileen's campaign may be one small breeze in a political hurricane which is about to sweep through post-referendum Britain. The Lib Dems were decimated in the 2015 general election. Their 5-year coalition with David Cameron's austerity Conservatives saved the economy but destroyed the party. Parliamentary representation dropped from 56 to just 8 MPs. Then came Brexit. It was the Conservative split over Europe that led to the referendum, which never should have been held. And although they're adept at papering over the cracks, the Tories are failing to unite to develop a proper Brexit strategy. As for Labour, well, they're too immersed in a vicious civil war to care about national politics. On top of that, they've lost all support in their Scottish heartland, and the traditional working class is abandoning them for the anti-immigration UK Independence Party. The liberal movement which ruled the roost in Victorian England has been in decline for 100 years. There have been periodic pronouncements of the imminent revival, but all were at best premature. To be honest, my wife has as much hope of winning the council seat as an ice cream cone surviving high noon in the Sahara. In the last election in Tooting, the Liberal Democrats won 6.9% of the vote in this rock-solid Labour seat. The goal, however, is not to win, but to increase support that over time can be translated into major gains across the country, and to tell Prime Minister Theresa May that despite her best efforts, Europe is still very much on the agenda.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms. This portion of the program has been pre-recorded. We will normally have him live, but this evening, due to other commitments, we've had to record this portion of the program. Tom, we've got about 5 minutes left to go. Let's bullet point some of the items that we have yet to discuss. Since we've talked about foreign issues Guantanamo Bay, and there's some discussion about possibly closing that. And of course, what do we do with the prisoners? What is the discussion in Europe and in the UK on that?
Well, the Europeans can't understand why Guantanamo Bay is still there. Obama said that he would close it within months.
Right.
And here we are 8 years later. They can't understand why it's necessary. Why aren't these people simply brought to trial? They committed crimes. They're being held without or outside the legal system. The rule of law does not apply to them. It should apply to everyone. They are not prisoners of war. They're not being treated as prisoners of war. That is the feeling here. They simply have a difficult time getting their head around it.
I fully appreciate that. Of course, our opinion is that they perpetrated one of the greatest attacks in modern history on a country, and of course that being the participation.
Then put them on trial, send them to prison, execute them.
Say no more. There are people who would give you a high five on what you just pointed out. Let's go on to other items. I thought I'd just bring that up. Let's talk here for a moment about the Olympics. As a matter of fact, Britain is second in the Olympics. Is that?
They're going mad. They're going absolutely wild. Every day, the papers, television are just filled with the Olympics. They can't believe that they're in second place. Now, you have to put this in perspective. There are 360 million people who live in the United States, and your GDP is roughly a third of what it is here in the UK, a third higher. We're just behind you. We're only 60 million. We're ahead of the Chinese, which are 30 times bigger. This is incredible. Now, the reason is that in 1996, we only got one gold medal in the Atlanta Games. And so they set up the national lottery, and something like 15% of all the money raised goes towards supporting elite sports, mainly the Olympics. So training facilities, coaches, grants, things like that.
So we will see this eventually in British politics as well, and that is the evil, well, we call it the evil dollar. You would call it the evil pound. Yes, money has entered these programs in order to make them successful. And yes, we're seeing that here in the States. It's a matter of investing money. It is unfortunate, and I won't belabor the point on this for the sake of time, that originally the Olympics was designed for amateurs. It's now become fully a professional activity. That's a personal editorial comment on my part. Real quickly, the opinion there in the UK about amateur athletes versus professional athletes, your thoughts?
We tried to stay amateur for a long time, but we found ourselves falling further and further behind.
And that in fact is the reality. Let's move on to two other items very quickly as we wrap it up. Paralympics in danger because of lack of money?
Yes, travel grants are disappearing. They have not made good on the travel grants, and something at the moment, it seems as if something like 50 countries will be unable to attend the Paralympics.
Did we say something about money a few moments ago?
Oh, we did. Yes. Money makes the world go round. It certainly makes the Paralympians run.
Or compete. Very interesting. All right. Wrapping it up. British seagulls tripping on acid?
Yes. Apparently, they're very fond of flying ants. And these ants are filled with fomic acid. And fomic acid causes hallucinations. And because it's been such warm weather, they've been absolutely feasting on these ants and tripping and running into buildings and cars and even people. So if you're over here on vacation, beware of the seagull.
Our guest this afternoon, or our program this afternoon, Viewpoints Around the World. We had to end on that one with Tom Arms, again, of Look Ahead Radio. And as always, Tom, thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Lockwood.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.